The discovery of the Manikyala Stupa, Mountstuart Elphinstone's encounter with a lost Buddhist monument. The discovery. On a rain-soaked day in July 1809, a party of British officials and their Indian attendants, trudging through the difficult terrain of the Punjab, came upon a site that would leave an indelible impression on their minds. After crossing treacherous torrents and navigating narrow defiles where hostile forces had recently attacked them, they emerged into a landscape dotted with ancient ruins. There, rising from a low artificial mound, stood a massive stone structure, 70 feet high, circular in plan, and unlike anything they had seen before. The locals called it the Tope of Manikyala. They said it was built by the gods. The man who recorded this encounter was Mountstuart Elphinstone, the first British emissary to the Afghan court. His account, published in 1815 in An Account of the Kingdom of Kabul and its dependencies in Persia, Tartary and India, would become one of the earliest detailed European descriptions of a Buddhist monument in South Asia. The structure he described was the Manikyala Stupa, a sacred site that had stood for nearly 2,000 years, commemorating one of the most revered stories in Buddhist tradition, the self-sacrifice of Prince Sattva, an incarnation of the Buddha who gave his own body to feed 7 starving tiger cubs. Elphinstone did not know at the time that he was looking at a Buddhist stupa. The historical memory of Buddhism had long since faded from the plains of the Punjab, replaced by later religious traditions and local legends. But his meticulous observations would provide a vital record of the monument at a pivotal moment in history, just before the region was transformed by colonial intervention, archaeological excavation, and the gradual recovery of its Buddhist past. Mountstuart Elphinstone, the man behind the mission. To understand the significance of Elphinstone's encounter with the Manikyala Stupa, one must first understand the man himself and the extraordinary circumstances that brought him to the Punjab. Mountstuart Elphinstone was born in 1779 into a Scottish aristocratic family. He entered the service of the British East India Company in 1796 at the age of 17, and quickly distinguished himself through his intelligence, linguistic abilities, and diplomatic skill. By his early 30s, he had already served in various administrative and diplomatic roles, earning a reputation as one of the most capable young officers in British India. In 1808, Elphinstone was appointed as the first British emissary to the court of Shah Shuja al-Mulk Durrani, the embattled king of Afghanistan. The appointment came at a moment of intense geopolitical anxiety. Napoleon Bonaparte's empire was at its height, and the British feared that a Franco-Russian alliance might launch an invasion of India through the overland route, across Persia, through Afghanistan, and into the Punjab. The British East India Company sought to forge an alliance with the Afghan king to block any such invasion. Elphinstone's mission was therefore one of considerable urgency and danger. To reach the Afghan court, then located at Peshawar, he had to traverse territories controlled by Maharaja Ranjit Singh, the formidable Sikh ruler who was rapidly consolidating his power across the Punjab. The journey required delicate diplomacy, careful navigation of rival factions, and the endurance of harsh physical conditions. Elphinstone was not an antiquarian by training. He was a diplomat, a political agent, and a keen observer of human societies. Yet his account of his journey reveals a man of remarkable curiosity, one who recorded not only the political manoeuvrings of chieftains and kings, but also the landscapes, peoples, customs, and ancient ruins he encountered along the way. His memoir, An Account of the Kingdom of Kabul, stands as one of the most vivid and comprehensive European accounts of the early 19th century Punjab. The journey to Rawalpindi. Elphinstone's party crossed the Indus River in late June 1809 and entered the Punjab. Their progress was slow and fraught with difficulty. The monsoon rains had begun, turning roads into rivers and streams into impassable torrents. The party travelled with a substantial retinue, soldiers, servants, camp followers and baggage animals, making movement through the rugged terrain even more challenging. As they advanced, Elphinstone observed the changing landscape and the character of the local population. He noted the martial culture of the Sikhs, who were then emerging as the dominant power in the region. Of the Sikh chieftains and their followers, he wrote, "The Sikhs were manly in their appearance and were tall and thin, though muscular. They wore little clothes, their legs, half their thighs, and generally their arms and bodies, being bare. But they had often large scarfs thrown loosely over one shoulder. Their turbans were not large, but high, and rather flattened in front. Their beards and the hair on their heads and bodies are never touched by scissors. They generally carry matchlocks or bows, the better sort generally bows, and never pay a visit without a fine one in their hand and an embroidered quiver by their side." The mission arrived at Rawalpindi, which Elphinstone recorded as Rawalpindi, in early July. He described it as a large and populous town. It is a pretty place, is composed of terraced houses, and is very like a town west of the Indus. The country round is open, scattered with single hills, and tolerably cultivated. At Rawalpindi, the mission was forced to halt for 6 days while awaiting permission from Maharaja Ranjit Singh to proceed further. During this delay, Elphinstone had the opportunity to observe the local Sikh chieftains, including Juan Singh, Jai Singh, the chief of Rawalpindi. He described an encounter with this chieftain. "Juan Singh, the chief of Rawalpindi, and one of the greatest in the Punjab, visited me here. He was a plain, civil man, only distinguished from his followers by his decent appearance and manners. His numerous companions and attendants sat down promiscuously in a circle, and seemed all on a footing of equality." Elphinstone also recorded an intriguing glimpse of the private life of these Sikh chieftains. When he attempted to return Juan Singh's visit, he found that he and all his attendants were drunk, but about 4 in the afternoon he was reported sober and received us in a little smoky hovel in a small garden, his people in confusion as before. Most of them continued to sit, while he got up to receive us. It was during this halt at Rawalpindi that the mission received a notable visitor, Shah Zaman, the former king of Afghanistan, who had been blinded and deposed by his brother and was then living in exile under the protection of the Sikhs. Elphinstone recorded his audience with the fallen monarch with sympathy. "We visited him on the 10th of July and were not a little interested by the sight of a monarch whose reputation at one time spread so wide both in Persia and India. We found him seated on a plain couch, in a neat but not a large tent, spread with carpets and felts. We stood opposite to him till he desired us to be seated. His dress was plain, a white mantle faced with Persian brocade and a black shawl turban, but his appearance was very kingly." Elphinstone noted the peculiar tragedy of Shah Zaman's condition. He had by no means the appearance of a blind man. His eyes, though plainly injured, retained black enough to give vivacity to his countenance, and he always turned them towards the person with whom he was conversing. He had, however, some appearance of dejection and melancholy. The deposed king spoke of the reversals of fortune, observing that such misfortunes were the common portion of kings. Elphinstone reflected. Had he gone over all the history of Asia, he could scarcely have discovered a more remarkable instance of the mutability of fortune than he himself presented. Blind, dethroned, and exiled, in a country which he had twice subdued. The march from Rawalpindi, trials and perils. On July 12, 1808, the mission departed Rawalpindi and began its eastward march toward the Jhelum River, the Hydaspes of classical antiquity. The journey was arduous. Elphinstone described the terrain. The first 6 were, like those already mentioned, uncultivated country, much cut with deep ravines and torrent courses, and, like the whole country between the Hydaspes and Indus, pastured on by droves of horses of a very good breed. The party crossed the Swan River, a tributary of the Indus, which Elphinstone described as a large rivulet, which, though only up to our horses' girths, was so rapid as scarcely to be fordable. Several of our camels were swept down by the stream. The rains made the journey even more perilous. At one point, the mission was divided when a brook suddenly swelled. On one occasion, the rearguard, with some gentlemen of the mission, were cut off from the rest by the swelling of a brook, which had not been a foot deep when they began to cross. It came down with surprising violence, carrying away some loaded camels that were crossing at the time, and rising about 10 feet within a minute. Elphinstone was struck by the power of the natural forces around him. Nothing could be grander than this torrent. Such was its force that it ran in waves like the sea, and rose against the bank in a ridge like the surf on the coast of Coromandel. The most dangerous moment came when the mission passed through a narrow defile and came under attack. Elphinstone recorded the incident with characteristic understatement. In one of these defiles, the mission was stopped by a body of 6 who occupied the hills and commenced an attack upon us, first by rolling down large stones and at last by opening a fire, which was immediately returned. The attack had serious consequences. Their fire was at length put a stop to by the interposition of the 6 who attended the mission on the part of Juan Singh, unfortunately not till one man had been killed in the valley and Captain Pitman shot through the arm while ascending the hill at the head of a party of sepoys. In search of Taxila, the quest for ancient ruins. Despite the dangers and difficulties of the journey, Elphinstone and his companions found time to pursue antiquarian interests. The mission was passing through a region that British antiquarians had long speculated might contain the ruins of Taxila, the ancient Gandharan city of Takshashila, which had been a centre of learning and Buddhism for centuries. Major Francis Wilford, a British antiquarian whose speculative identifications often guided such quests, had suggested that the ruins of Taxila lay somewhere in this region. Elphinstone's party, delayed by heavy rain at one of their encampments, determined to explore the surrounding area. The heaviness of the rain prevented our marching from that place on the day after we reached it, and as we were near the place which Major Wilford supposes to have been the site of Taxila, a party determined to set out in quest of the ruins of that city. The exploration took them on a circuit of some 40 miles. Elphinstone recorded what they observed. In the course of a circuit of about 40 miles, we saw the ruins of some Gukha towns destroyed by the 6, and those of some others still more ancient, which had suffered the same fate from the Mussulmans. We also saw 1 or 2 caravanserais, here called rabouts, and we heard of an obelisk of a single stone, 50 or 60 feet high, at a place called Rauji, which was too distant to visit. Initially, the party was disappointed. We met with no ruins of such antiquity as to have any pretensions to a connection with Taxila. But then they found something far more remarkable. 6. The discovery of the Manikyala Stupa. Elphinstone's account of the discovery is among the most vivid passages in his memoir. He introduced it with a sense of awe. The most remarkable sight we met with in this part, and perhaps in the whole of our journey, was an edifice about 15 miles from Banda, our second march from Rawalpindi. As the party approached, they first glimpsed what appeared to be a cupola rising from the landscape. We, however, at length discovered a remarkable building, which seemed at first to be a cupola, but when approached, was found to be a solid structure on a low artificial mound. Elphinstone then provided a meticulous description of the structure's dimensions. The height from the top of the mound to the top of the building was about 70 feet, and the circumference was found to be 150 paces. He noted the materials used in construction. It was built of large pieces of a hard stone common in the neighbourhood, which appeared to be composed of petrified vegetable matter, mixed with smaller pieces of a sandy stone. The greater part of the outside was cased with the first mentioned stone cut quite smooth, and the whole seemed intended to have been thus faced, though it had either been left incomplete or the casing had fallen down. Elphinstone's eye for architectural detail is evident in his description of the structure's design. The plan of the whole could, however, be easily discovered. Some broad steps, now mostly ruined, led to the base of the pile. Round the base is a moulding on which are pilasters about 4 feet high and 6 feet asunder. These have plain capitals and support a cornice marked with parallel lines and beadings. The whole of this may be 7 or 8 feet high, from the uppermost step to the top of the cornice. The building then retires, leaving a ledge of a foot or two broad, from which rises a perpendicular wall about 6 feet high. About a foot above the ledge is a fillet, formed by stones projecting a very little from the wall, and at the top of the wall is a more projecting cornice from which the sphere springs. He observed the precise placement of the facing stones. The stones of the facing are about 3 feet and a half long and 1.5 broad, and are so put in that the ends only are exposed. At the top of the structure, he noted, "The top is flat, and on it the foundations of walls are discoverable, enclosing a space of 11 paces long by 5 broad. A third of this area is cut off by the foundation of a cross wall." Elphinstone's reflections: Grecian architecture or something else? Elphinstone's most striking observation was cultural and aesthetic. He recognised that the structure belonged to a tradition entirely distinct from the Hindu architecture with which he was familiar. There was nothing at all Hindu in the appearance of this building. Most of the party thought it decidedly Grecian. He elaborated on this impression. It was indeed as like Grecian architecture as any building which Europeans, in remote parts of the country, could now construct by the hands of unpractised native builders. This perception reflected a common tendency among European observers of the period to attribute sophisticated ancient architecture in Asia to Greek influence, a legacy of Alexander the Great's campaigns in the region. Yet Elphinstone's observation was not without insight. The Gandharan civilization that produced the Manikyala Stupa had indeed been profoundly influenced by Greco-Roman artistic traditions, and the stupa's architectural ornamentation, the pilasters, capitals and cornices, showed clear classical influences. Elphinstone also recorded what the local inhabitants knew of the structure. The natives called it the Tope of Manikyala and said it was built by the gods. He noted the structure's state of decay and the natural growth that had taken hold. Many bushes and one pretty large banyan tree grow out of the building. Crucially, Elphinstone did not speculate wildly. He recorded what he saw with the precision of a trained observer, leaving behind a valuable baseline description of the stupa's condition in the early 19th century, before later excavations and restorations altered its appearance. The Manikyala Stupa in light of modern knowledge. From the perspective of contemporary archaeology and Gandharan studies, Elphinstone's Topi of Manikyala is now definitively identified as a Buddhist stupa dating primarily to the Kushan period, 1st to 3rd century CE, though with possible earlier origins. Dating and construction. Archaeological evidence for the Kushan era, circa 128 to 151 CE. Archaeological evidence firmly dates the primary construction and major phase of the stupa to the Kushan period, specifically during the reign of Emperor Kanishka I, approximately 128 to 151 CE. This precise chronology is anchored by multiple lines of material evidence recovered from within the stupa itself. During excavations, relic chambers deep inside the structure yielded coins minted under Kanishka and his successor Huvishka, along with other artifacts consistent with the early 2nd century CE. A Kharosthi inscription discovered at the site further corroborates this dating. It records a pious donation made in the 18th year of King Kanishka's reign by a satrap named Vespasi. The inscription details the enshrinement of Buddha relics, the construction or renovation of a monastery by a figure named Buritena, and oversight by a superintendent called Budila, dated specifically to the 20th day of the month Kartika. Such epigraphic and numismatic finds are hallmarks of Kushan patronage, when the empire under Kanishka promoted Mahayana Buddhism across Gandhara, fostering a golden age of art, learning, and monumental architecture. An alternate theory, rooted in Buddhist tradition, suggests the stupa may trace its origins to the Mauryan emperor Ashoka, 3rd century BCE, who legendarily erected 84,000 stupas across his vast empire to enshrine portions of the Buddha's relics following their distribution after the parinirvana. Emperor Kanishka is said to have visited and venerated such sites during his campaigns. However, no direct Ashokan-era inscriptions, pillars or coins have been found at Manikyala, leading most scholars to view any Mauryan foundation as hypothetical or limited to an earlier, smaller structure that was dramatically enlarged and embellished during the Kushan period, a common pattern in Gandharan stupas, where successive rulers and devotees layered patronage over centuries. The stupa's hemispherical dome, anda, base mouldings and classical pilasters reflect this syncretic evolution, blending Indian Buddhist symbolism with Hellenistic and Persian influences that flourished under Kushan rule. The stupa's association with the Prince Sattva Jataka, also known as the Mahasattva or Vyagri Jataka, adds profound spiritual depth. In this tale from the Jataka collection, and elaborated in the Suvarnaprabhasa Sutra, Golden Light Sutra, the Bodhisattva Prince Sattva, a previous incarnation of Shakyamuni Buddha, encounters a starving tigress and her 7 cubs in a forest. Out of boundless compassion, he offers his own body as food to save the cubs from death, ultimately sacrificing his life. The stupa marks the legendary site of this act of supreme dana, generosity, and karuna, compassion, making it a pilgrimage centre for devotees seeking to emulate the bodhisattva ideal. This narrative was widely depicted in Gandharan reliefs, underscoring the site's importance in propagating Mahayana teachings across Asia. Architectural identification and function. Architectural identification. What Elphinstone described as a cupola was actually the hemispherical dome, anda, of the stupa, a symbolic representation of the cosmic mountain and the Buddha's final liberation from the cycle of rebirth. The pilasters and cornices, he noted, are characteristic of Gandharan Buddhist architecture, which drew heavily on Greco-Roman artistic conventions, hence his party's impression of Grecian influence. The flat top, he observed, likely held a harmika, a square railing, and a central pillar, chadra, now lost, representing the axis of the universe and the Buddha's enlightenment. Buddhist context. The structure's association with the Prince Sattva Jataka is now central to its significance. This narrative, the self-sacrifice of a bodhisattva who gave his own body to feed starving tiger cubs, is one of the most revered stories in Mahayana Buddhism. It embodies the ideal of limitless compassion, the willingness to sacrifice one's own well-being for the sake of all sentient beings. The stupa's location is traditionally held to be the very site of this act of selflessness. Later excavations within the stupa revealed reliquaries containing what are believed to be sacred relics, confirming its function as a pilgrimage destination where devotees could venerate the Buddha and accumulate merit. The surrounding settlement. Elphinstone's party was searching for Taxila, but did not realise that Manikyala was itself a major Buddhist monastic complex. While earlier surveys proposed a substantial Buddhist period settlement with around 2,000 homes interspersed with monasteries and as many as 15 smaller stupas, more recent archaeological assessments indicate it was primarily a focused monastic and pilgrimage complex rather than a large urban centre. Typical of Gandharan Vihara stupa layouts on the Pothahar Plateau. The Buddhist period settlement is thought to have comprised monasteries and smaller stupas spread across the hillock that now holds the modern village of Tope Manikyala. The destruction by fire that Elphinstone did not specifically note has since been corroborated by archaeological evidence. Scholars believe this destruction points to a violent end to the Buddhist period in the region, likely during the Hunnic invasions of the 5th to 6th centuries CE, when White Huns swept through Gandhara, destroying monasteries and stupas across the region. Architectural evolution. Elphinstone noted what appeared to be an incomplete or damaged stone casing. Modern archaeology suggests that the stupa underwent multiple phases of construction, renovation, and relic deposition over several centuries. Each phase likely represented the patronage of different rulers and the accumulation of merit by successive generations of Buddhist devotees. The relic chamber, located approximately 67 feet below the original top and 20 feet above ground level, contained layered deposits spanning Kushan to later periods, illustrating centuries of veneration. 9. Later archaeological work and restoration. Following Elphinstone's account, the Manikyala Stupa attracted increasing attention from British antiquarians and military officers. In the later decades of the 19th century, as the archaeology of Gandhara developed into a systematic discipline, the site became the focus of more formal investigation. The first systematic excavation occurred in 1830 under General Jean-Baptiste Ventura, a French officer serving Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Ventura sank a deep shaft, approximately 22.25 metres, 73 feet, into the stupa, uncovering a series of sealed relic chambers. Inside, he found iron and gold boxes containing bone fragments, believed to be sacred relics, along with coins from the Kushan dynasty, including those of Kanishka and Huvishka, Sasanian issues and other artifacts. These discoveries not only confirmed the stupa's Buddhist identity and Kushan dating, but also revealed its role as a repository for ongoing relic veneration across empires. The principal relics and reliquaries were subsequently removed during the British Raj and are now preserved in the British Museum in London as part of the Manikyala hoard, where they continue to be studied for insights into ancient trade, iconography, and Buddhist ritual practices. An inscription on a stone at the site records that the stupa was restored in 1891 by a regiment of the British Indian Army, with Raja Usman serving as architect. Such restorations were not uncommon during the British period. Military units stationed in the region often took an interest in preserving ancient monuments, though their interventions varied considerably in archaeological sensitivity. Subsequent excavations in the late 19th and early 20th centuries uncovered a range of artifacts, including a small stone reliquary, terracotta plaques depicting Buddhist scenes, coins from the Kushan and later periods, and fragments of sculptures. These findings confirmed the stupa's significance as a major Buddhist pilgrimage site and provided material evidence for its use over several centuries. The artifacts are now housed in various museums, including the Lahore Museum in Pakistan and the British Museum in London. More recently, in 2024, a collaborative 3-month excavation project was launched by a joint team from Pakistan's Department of Archaeology and the Korea Cultural Heritage Foundation. Under the project, Tracing the Link Between Korea and Pakistan Through Gandhara Cultural Heritage. This work focused on uncovering lower buried structures, revealing meditative cells surrounding the main stupa, and a passage leading into an additional chamber, offering fresh insights into the site's monastic layout and potential connections between Gandharan Buddhism and East Asian traditions. Complementing these efforts, private philanthropists Ahmed Sajjad Khan and Alamdar Hasnain Mehdi personally funded extensive rehabilitation work in 2024, investing millions to address decades of disrepair, including vegetation overgrowth and structural damage. The Punjab government has allocated 4 million rupees for further restoration using traditional cut stone blocks, while improved road access, supported by World Bank funding, aims to position the site as a heritage tourism destination. The stupa remains protected under Pakistan's Antiquities Act of 1975. The stupa's enduring significance. The Manikyala Stupa remains one of the most prominent Buddhist structures in Pakistan, reflecting the deep historical and cultural layers of Gandharan civilization. It stands as a testament to the region's role as a crossroads of cultures, where Indian, Persian, Hellenistic and Central Asian influences converged to produce a distinctive artistic and religious tradition that profoundly shaped the development of Buddhism across Asia. The stupa's association with the Prince Sattva Jataka gives it particular spiritual significance. The story of the Bodhisattva's sacrifice has been depicted in countless works of Gandharan art, and it continues to be revered in Buddhist traditions across the world. For Buddhist pilgrims, the stupa represents not only a historical monument, but a living site of spiritual inspiration, a place where the ideal of boundless compassion was realized. In recent years, there have been calls for greater conservation efforts and for the site to be developed as a heritage tourism destination. Such initiatives face challenges related to funding, urban encroachment, and the need for sustained archaeological oversight. Yet the stupa endures, drawing visitors, pilgrims, and scholars who seek to understand the rich Buddhist heritage of the Pothahar Plateau. With ongoing Patkorean excavations and private restorations now underway, the monument is experiencing a renaissance that honours its 2,000-year legacy while ensuring its preservation for future generations. Conclusion. Mountstuart Elphinstone's encounter with the Manikyala Stupa stands as a pivotal moment in the European rediscovery of South Asia's Buddhist heritage. Though he did not fully understand what he had found, lacking the linguistic and archaeological frameworks that would emerge later, his detailed account preserved a vital record of the monument before extensive modern intervention. His observation that the structure appeared neither Hindu nor purely indigenous, but bore the marks of classical, Grecian influence inadvertently pointed towards the syncretic Greco-Buddhist civilization of Gandhara, now recognized as one of the most sophisticated cultural crossroads of the ancient world. His meticulous measurements and descriptions have provided modern archaeologists with a valuable baseline for understanding the stupa's condition in the early 19th century. Elphinstone's journey, undertaken for reasons of state and military strategy to forge an alliance against a feared Franco-Russian invasion, inadvertently contributed to the scholarly foundation that would later illuminate the Buddhist past of the Pothahar Plateau. In his own words, describing the moment of discovery, he captured the wonder that the monument has inspired for centuries. We, however, at length discovered a remarkable building, which seemed at first to be a cupola, but when approached, was found to be a solid structure on a low artificial mound. That remarkable building endures today, a silent witness to the devotion of ancient pilgrims, the ambitions of empires, from Ashoka's legendary foundations through Kanishka's grand Kushan patronage, and the curiosity of a Scottish diplomat whose chance encounter with it would help reintroduce the Buddhist heritage of Gandhara to the world. From the self-sacrifice of Prince Sattva to the diplomatic mission of Mountstuart Elphinstone, and now to 21st century excavations linking Pakistan and Korea, the Manikyala Stupa connects us to 2 millennia of history, reminding us of the enduring power of compassion and the persistent human impulse to mark sacred ground.